All right, this is our new class on sin. We called it studying sin seriously. And I will tell you this morning, you already have plenty of notes to go over for next week. We're not going to jump in this morning and actually start, like we don't have a sin that we say, okay, we're going to start defining it, and we're going to start looking at all the places that we can find it. No, this morning we have to discuss why have this class at all. So, have you ever been, like I know when we go to the Hillsville Flea Market, we see a lot of this, or you might be walking through the mall or someplace like that. So have you ever seen a demonstration of something? They want you to buy the product, and they have this lengthy demonstration, and you actually would say, this is interesting. He's doing a good job selling it. But then you walk away and you don't buy it. Why is that? Okay. A lot of times I would sit and look at a demonstration and say they're doing a good job. They're making it look good. But if I just can honestly say, I'm not going to use that, then I don't need it. And that is exactly how a lot of people, they find no use for this type of study. So why is it they don't have any use for this type of study? Let's study sin seriously. Why do they not have any use? Okay. They're coming with preconceived ideas. They're going to say, what difference does it make? You know. Okay. If you've been taught that you were born in sin and you just can't help it, then I don't really need to know what is sin because I'm going to do it anyway. And then Mark said, if you believe once saved, always saved, then it doesn't matter studying sin. Ian.
It could be that a person today would think that something that was counted as a sin back in the day might have been counted as a sin because of cultural reasons.
Okay.
Necessarily have any intrinsic value for today, so they would think, why do I need to know about the standards that they had back in the day when we're living in a whole other time frame?
Okay, another preconceived idea, like if someone said, well, God's laws change with culture, they don't see how they need it. One reason I would say is Christians that don't intend to talk to lost people have no use for this study. And we're not trying to, that's a lot of people on Facebook that are not members of the church that saw the advertisement. They already have the wrong idea of this class. They think that we're coming in here to call people's names out, that we're trying to judge people, that we want to put people we're going to have on the screen everybody going to hell. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to educate ourselves to protect ourselves and then also help other people. So let's look at it this way. I'm going to try to sell you a study of sin. Why do a serious study of sin? So what would you think if you go into the hospital, you go to the doctor's office, and you basically get to have a conversation, and the person practicing their medicine on you says, I went to medical school where I studied treatments and medicine, but I never studied disease or proper diagnosis. Would you feel comfortable? Okay. Everybody says no, and I'm saying this is your health. And do you know that when John writes in his later New Testament epistles, he says, it would be 3 John. He says, I hope you're doing well in your spirit as you are bodily. We care very much about our bodily health. So why don't we care about our spiritual health? And that's what we have to deal with as far as sin goes. Now, I'm going to make a quick illustration. If you've got something to tie into it, that's fine. The stomach problem I have, you can either have Crohn's disease or you can have ulcerative colitis. And we would say, well, we get this, Caleb, but I don't know if it's going to necessarily be that extreme, the analogy. There are 3 things to have ulcerative colitis that have to show up in the test. If those 3 things don't show up in the test, then they would have marked me as having Crohn's. And do you know why that's a problem? Well, you can't cure it, but not all Crohn's medicine works for ulcerative colitis medicine. So y'all could be giving me the wrong medicine. You want your doctor to know what you're talking about, but you don't care if Christians know what they're talking about, and that's the problem. And something to talk about this, does everybody know the difference? And I'm not saying you have to explain it right now, but is there a difference between fornication and adultery? Yeah. Do both involve sexual activity? But are they different? Okay, and you got to know those, don't you? Because if you get them confused, what do you end up having happen?
You don't know what treatment to administer.
You have very heavy consequences if you don't know the difference. Okay, here's another one. Or why, let's continue this idea, law and medicine. doing word studies, we're going to do word studies as we come in here, but do you know that in Romans 7:12, where he says, wherefore the law is holy and the commandment holy and just and good? If you actually do, this is just surface study, but if you look at Strong's Concordance and Strong's Dictionary, that word commandment could very well easily be translated prescription. So let's think about this. Now, would people say that keeping some of the commands of God are difficult? Okay, when somebody gives you medicine, what could you possibly say about it? Okay, this does not taste good. This is a big pill to swallow. Side effects. So another thing, when I had low iron, and who knows what all you need more iron for, but when they gave me a pill, they said, okay, we need to bump up your iron. And then this is what they said. Now it's probably going to hurt your stomach. I don't want to take it then. That's how it's going to be. When individuals start making up their mind, man, I do need to repent. I got this stuff going on. And then somebody on the outside says, well, you better get ready. It's going to be tough. It's taking medicine. It's designed to help you. It's good. It's holy. It's a prescription. Now, here's one more idea. Matthew 9:12-13. Why do people not think about, I need Jesus? Right there. They don't recognize that they're sick. Can you be sick for quite a while and not know it? Okay. So what you have to start saying, for me, I'm going to keep using it, man. I'm sick. So I would always be tired, always be cold, but I didn't have these notable symptoms, and everybody's saying, well, why don't you go to the doctor? Well, I'm not going to be able to just figure out why I'm tired and why I'm cold. And then they find out you got low vitamin D levels. See, we've got to go through these things because if there's a problem, the Bible can fix it. But people don't see it that way. Here's one more illustration. Traffic school. Tanner just goes through traffic school. I don't know. And I'll ask you this. Do y'all remember anything you heard in traffic school? Okay. Mark, you do? I don't. How far behind a car should you follow? Okay. So, and this is a good illustration on this is how Bible study differs from these other type of things. So the way they taught us in driving school was 3 seconds behind, and I don't know what that translates to a car length. So the way that they told us was if you're following a car and they pass a light pole, you should count how many seconds it takes for you to get to that light pole. Now, today we're going to accept a car length, 2 car lengths, 3 car lengths. Now, I do know that at a stoplight they told us to stop 3 car lengths behind a car. Reduce speed by how much when it's raining? What did you say?
10 miles.
Okay. Boy, this is something. 5 miles, 10 miles, they told us 15 miles. You should slow down 15 miles an hour when it starts raining. Where in Virginia is it legal to make a U-turn? Okay. Virginia law is you can only make a U-turn in an intersection. You're in the middle of a road, you shouldn't be doing that. Some intersections, Terry said, when it's posted, some intersections are going to tell you not to do it. But here's our question now. Let's think about this. Will the police pull you over for going 56 and a 55? Probably not, unless you're in Boone's Mill, right? Okay. Why did they make these 3 rules? Why did they come up with those things? Okay, boundaries. Safety. Now let's look at this one. What if the state of Virginia told everybody, we want you to put a green sticker in the bottom right corner of your windshield? What would you say?
What's the reason for that?
Okay, what's the reason for it, Ian says. And then they say back to you, we want to see who acknowledges our authority. What would you say? No.
Is it a law?
Is it a law? Okay. Let's think about this. Is that how people actually view God's laws? I would say yes. They look at the Bible and they see these laws, they see these statements, and they just think about all kinds of things about it. Just this traditional and discourages free thinking. They think of an old bearded white man sitting on a cloud saying, don't do this because I said so. Now, I said if the state of Virginia said this, Ian, the question then becomes, what would you do? Ian says, I would ask them why. And do you know what today? It's fine. It's okay to ask why the Bible says something is sinful. Do you think that God in heaven, who made us intellectual beings, expected us to not question? There are reasons behind why He says to do certain things and to avoid certain things, and it's the same reason that we have traffic laws. It's all about safety. Medicine, you got a problem, we can fix it. He would like to fix our problems. And then I put this final point, number 4, in there. Will please pull you over for going 56 and a 55. Y'all, we are going to inadvertently break God's laws at times. That's not the same thing as open rebellion. And the Bible says that in Numbers 15. There's a law for ignorance. And then He says there's a law for those who sin presumptuously. And let's talk about this too. How is it the case when we would say we would inadvertently break some laws? Why is that?
Emergency.
Okay. Now, I don't mean like the speed limit law. Okay, so are you actually saying like there are things in God's law that in a case of emergency would be different?
Well, I was referring to the speed limit.
Okay, okay, that's fine.
If you were headed to the emergency room, you'd probably break the speed limit.
Okay, and the government allows for that.
Yeah.
So, but as we're talking about God's law, and I'm saying we are going to inadvertently break it because you can't be perfect. And I think in instances of that nature, God can be gracious to us. So what are some reasons why we're going to end up breaking God's law? And it's the idea, we're saying 56 and a 55. What would it be? Okay, ignorance. Okay, now we said ignorance is not the same thing as a presumptuous sin.
You may be angry and something or say something
okay.
you normally do.
Now, that's something we got to work at.
Yeah.
But again, if that's what you're working with, that's what you're working with. If you're trying to fix it, you're trying to fix it.
I can see where I can rationalize myself into breaking one of God's laws. Well, if I were to do what it says in the Bible, then it would cause all of these things that are, clearly undesirable. So God would understand if I just didn't do this.
Okay, so that's a good. Ian says people rationalize God's law or rationalize breaking the law by saying, if I really start cleaning up my life the way the Bible would suggest, then all these negative things are going to happen. What's the problem with that way of thinking?
If you're not cleaning up your life, something negative has already happened.
Okay, if you're not cleaning up your life, something negative is already in process. Your soul is in danger. Your circumstances could get worse, number 2. But then number 3, we cannot tell the future. You could actually say, man, I'm going to really clean up. I'm going to start following God. And what could the people around you do? What could they say? Me too. Thank you for your example. We always make it negative. Now, another part of this is being misinformed is not the same thing as presumptuous sin either. But what's the problem with being misinformed? Staying misinformed. That's the problem. You can learn the truth. When you learn better, do you start doing better? Okay. Now we've got all these points ahead of us, and let's look at one more thing. We said about people, we say, man, I don't get why more people don't feel concerned about I need Jesus in my life. And this is a reason why. In John 1:29, John sees Jesus coming unto him and says, behold, the Lamb of God, which takes away the sin of the world. How do people, they're not a Christian, and they're just barely religious, how do they describe Jesus?
A good person.
That's it. He's a good dude. Gave us some good principles. That is not it. Jesus' entire mission, his entire function as the Christ is to take away our sin. And if you don't have that idea of him, then somebody would say, well, this study is pointless for me. I'm not worried about sin. Therefore, I'm not worried about following Jesus. But if we had a mind of sin, then Jesus becomes that much more important. Okay. Now, these are our illustrations. If we recognize medicine can have side effects, medicine can taste bad, but at the end of the day, it is good for you. And then the traffic laws. You got to know them for everybody's safety. There was one that we didn't have in there. What's the speed limit in a school zone?
25.
25. And what's the purpose of it? don't hit somebody's child. Now, we all recognize that, and for those of us who are always in a hurry and you're already a speed demon, dropping from 60 to 25, you start grumbling. It's there for a very important reason, and how quickly can your car get back up to 60 miles an hour? That's how people sell a car. It goes 0 to 60 and blah, blah, blah. And we can't slow down for somebody's child. Okay, let's look at some more points. You have this in your text. In Galatians 3:24, now if you read commentaries, you're going to have a lot of people, this is just an illustration for this morning, you're going to have a lot of people don't like the word schoolmaster. But did not the law inform a whole entirety of people that they were in need of something? They had all these laws, and they had a structure on how to have their sins forgiven, which involved animal sacrifices once in the morning, once in the evening. You do your own personal, you bring your lamb when you need to, Leviticus 5, and then Leviticus 16, we're going to have an annual sacrifice for everybody. That's a lot of sacrificing, so that implies what? That's a lot of sinning. But he made that system, the sacrifices, to take care of their sins. Then you get to Galatians 4:1, they're not going to like the idea of schoolmaster. Then you get to Galatians 4:1 and 2, you've got tutors and governors. People don't see the value in Christianity because they're not looking at it as an education system. That is exactly what we are. You're not here to be entertained. You do come here to get fellowship, which is good in itself. But this is an education institute. We should be learning, we should be growing. It's the same idea. All these things, we're learning these for our safety. Now, Ian got a new job however many years ago. What was one of the first things you had to go through? Safety training, right? We're not going to get out here like messing with chemicals, messing with all this equipment. Safety training, and that's exactly how the law works. And who's going to have a problem with that? They're not arbitrary. We're saying you get to question why. And now let's look at this. If we were to really ask you, and I'm saying don't be like extravagant, I want $1 million yacht. What are a lot of people really looking for, whether they realize it or not, in life?
Fulfillment.
Okay, a sense of fulfillment. I would say you're going to get that through personal evangelism.
Acceptance from others.
Okay. You'd like to be accepted by others. Probably not as a Christian, though. Stability. I'll take that one and say that's, I think, what we're looking for. Stability, quietness, peacefulness. If you would like to have that, you are going to have to cut sin out of your life. 1 Thessalonians 4:11. And that ye study to be quiet, do your own business, work with your own hands as we commanded you. And 1 Timothy 2:2 says that we ought to pray for kings and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty. It works all over the place. If you follow biblical pattern for raising your kids, you can have a peaceful home life. If you follow the biblical instruction for marriage atmosphere, have a peaceful home life. You follow what the Bible says about being an employee, you don't have to get wrapped up in everybody's workplace drama. And that's annoying. You can do your job very well, and let other people waste the employer's time and money. And you know what's going to happen if you do your job well while everybody else is fooling around? They take note. That's exactly right. And somebody said, well, the Bible talking about working hard. And they overlooked me last month. Maybe you don't work that hard. Maybe you talk a lot of trash. So, all these points in there, they're for our education. They're to help us have a better life. God is not just trying to be burdensome on us. Now, this is one we're getting close to finishing up. But what's a new studying sin? This is going to touch a lot of things. What's a New Testament command that the church has that oftentimes does not get carried out? That's it. Good job. When you look at 2 Thessalonians 3, 6, 14, and 15, chapter 3, verse 6, verse 14, verse 15. We command you, brethren, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you withdraw yourselves from every brother that walketh disorderly, and not after the tradition which he received of us. And if any man obey not our word by this epistle, note that man, and have no company with him, that he may be ashamed. Yet count him not as an enemy, but admonish him as a brother. Now, there are multiple reasons as to why this command does not get carried out. You can find this in other places too. 1 Corinthians 5, Romans 16, 1 Timothy 6. Why does church discipline not get carried out?
Because it tastes bad.
It tastes bad. What tastes worse?
An unclean church.
An unclean church is worse. And how does that manifest itself, y'all, in a lot of ways? If you've got open sin that's not being corrected, they are setting precedent for everybody else. We have now just allowed sin to have free reign in the congregation. We can't correct anything else because that's always going to come up. Well, y'all let this go on. So how are you going to come down on me? When that starts happening, what are people going to want to do less? You're not going to want to study. Why? Why would we study? We got this going on. We're not doing anything with it. I think that one of the biggest reasons, I figured somebody would say family, right? People don't get withdrawn from because it's somebody's family member. But that's not what we're talking about. I think that church discipline does not get carried out because more times than not, those who are in the leadership do not know how to adequately define sinful activity. How do things usually go about? What are the talking points? Something needs correction. How do people usually do it? I just don't think that's the best way to do it. I don't like that. Very vague terms that mean nothing. What's the best way to address a problem in the congregation effectively? Put a scripture to it, put the term on them, and say we're fixing to practice church discipline. But let's look at just one example this morning. I have hardly ever heard anybody talk about this one. Now, let's say this. What are the sins that get a lot of attention in Bible study?
Idolatry.
Okay. Idolatry. What?
A lot of times they say smoking.
Okay. Smoking, idolatry, drinking. Let's look at this one together. We have, in this congregation, we have withdrawn from a member over this particular sin. Ephesians 4:31, clamor. Now, a lot of times people, like you would see something, and what was it? What was the problem that we said is clamor? It's one thing to disagree, and that's fine. We can talk about it. But when you blow up in the middle of everything and you actually ruin Bible class for everybody else, that is what the Bible calls clamor. Just the loud, boisterous disruption. Now, a lot of people don't know that that's there to begin with, let alone using it in the Scripture. 3 John 8 and 9, what was one of the things that Diotrephes did? Okay. He wanted to have the preeminence, and what did he do against faithful brethren? Let's look at this. I'm looking for a particular word. Prating against us with malicious words. Now, we talk a lot of times in the Bible study, people are going to talk about drinking, they're going to talk about smoking, they're going to talk about fornication. How often are y'all going to hear about this sinful activity? Prating against faithful brethren with malicious words. We don't just get to be talking trash about people. And if there's a real problem, one of y'all calls up Mark and they say, Mark, I'd like to talk to you about something I saw Ian doing. And I don't think it's very good. Okay, what should Mark say? If it was something private, Matthew 18, Mark should say, well, you need to take that up with Ian. If it's something open, then he should say, well, how about we both go talk to Ian instead of just talking about Ian on the phone. Look, we got all this coming up in the class. This is why church discipline does not happen. And when you do not do church discipline, people end up not wanting to come to Bible class because it's an uncomfortable setting. Now, nobody can define sin. You got all these different chapters that we went over this morning. Maliciousness, malignity, whisperers, covenant breakers, lasciviousness. We're going to talk about all these things over the next upcoming weeks. What's that?
Backbreakers.
Backbiters.
Yeah.
Romans 1:30, but that's in there. We're going to talk about that too. Okay. Somebody says, we're fixing to wrap up. We'll probably make real quick of this. An all-loving God would not allow such moral atrocities to happen. Why is that a bad argument? if we followed the law, what would not happen? So whose fault is it? It's humans. It's not on God. And then what would happen? Someone says, well, I don't know why God doesn't intervene when these moral atrocities happen. What would people complain about then?
Lack of free will.
I don't like a God that infringes on my free will. There's no pleasing people, but God is trying to protect us. Now, what are people going to think we're doing in this class? Binding heavy burdens, straining at a gnat to swallow a camel. That is not what this class is about. We are not, look, y'all, we didn't come up with this class because we said, well, there's some sin going on in the congregation and this is going to be our way to go a roundabout way to covering it. That's not what we're doing. We're really trying to get down to the information so we can better ourselves, so that we can protect ourselves and then help other people with it also. And we're going to be realistic too. Does the Bible say that sinning is fun? The Bible says you have a good time doing some sin. Hebrews 11:24 and 25. Moses rejected or refused to be called Pharaoh's daughter, called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer the affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasure of sin for a season. Somebody says Christians don't want you to have fun. I tell you, some of it's fun. And then it carries a lot of consequences. Proverbs 9:17, stolen waters are sweet. What's better than a watermelon? A stolen watermelon. That's what John Shannon would say. He would say, man, a watermelon tastes good. Stolen one's even better. Bible says it right there. Bread eaten in secret is pleasant. It's got consequences, and we're going to talk about it. Okay, last one. Somebody says, I like this part of the Bible. Love God, love your neighbor. That's so pleasant. I like that. Not so judgmental. Well, I want to look at this. Have you asked this question before? On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. How is it the case that love God, love your neighbor, everything else is tied into that? How is that? Okay, and who else? If I love God and I care about my neighbor, I'm not going to involve myself in activities that hurt my neighbor. Does everybody love their neighbor? Do you even know all of your neighbors? This is a big time mind change that we all have to start cultivating. Who do we look out for? Number one. I'm looking out for number one. I got to get rid of that idea. This is how the Bible says we're supposed to act. Love God, love your neighbor, and everything else hangs in on that. Ephesians 4:17 through 19. This is our last one. People are not looking at it that way. They're not seeing the dangers of sin, the consequences of sin. And so what is actually happening and why it's so pertinent that we all talk about sin and adequately define sin, what's happening to people while they continue in sin? Number one, like Ian said earlier, your circumstances are probably going to get worse. I'm talking about the inside of them, their inner man. What's happening? They are becoming past feeling, right there towards the bottom, this line. Who being past feeling, they're getting used to it. And when we come along and say, have you thought about changing this point in your life? What are they going to say? Man, I've been doing that for like 20 years. No, I'm not going to change that now. What is it? Callous. Your conscience is seared. So this morning, these are all reasons why everybody should be studying sin. It's not this idea of God just doesn't want things for you and God wants to keep you pressed down. None of these things are arbitrary. They all have very, very heavy meaning and significance. And this is what you and I are fixing to embark on. So this morning, like we said, we had to make this study make sense and say, yeah, I need this. This is something I'm going to get use out of so that we're all ready to do the study as we continue the next several weeks. I'll be presenting. Ian is going to be presenting. And like we said, next time we come back, we'll retake this pop quiz together. And we'll have homework for you next week. Any questions or comments as we stop here? Okay. If nothing, we'll take our break and get everything ready to go, and we'll come back in just a few moments. Okay, thank you. Okay. Good morning. Good to see everybody that is here. Jackie is not feeling well. She's going to have to... She was texting me earlier, making an appointment with her doctor. She's been having foot and ankle problems for last couple of weeks, and she says it's getting worse. So we need to remember her in our prayers today while we're here together, and then, of course, as we leave and are separated. This morning we won't have a test. We did take up homework sheets, and then when you leave today, you'll get new, fresh homework sheets. And the way that we're going to be doing this is the things that are on your homework sheets will be how we start formulating new tests. And so this will be homework, and also too, the way that you get your answers to homework questions is most of it's going to be in the class today. So it's like, right, this is 3 ways for us to remember what we're going over. You have the class, have your homework, you take your test. We're trying to solidify information in our heads. So you'll get that at the end of class, and you'll probably get to have these back by the time that you leave. And that way you get to do more of your study. Okay. Now, this morning we're going to start, and let's talk about this too, how the class is going, and will go. So 2 weeks ago I introduced, and we had the discussion of why have this type of class anyways. And the reason that we said is a lot of congregations will bemoan the fact that church discipline never happens, and we said that the reason church discipline hardly ever happens is because people don't know the Bible well enough to define sin or remember where the actual sin is located, so where we can put a scripture on it and it not be so vague as people saying, well, I didn't like that. Well, nobody cares what you liked or didn't like. We want to know, is it lawful or unlawful? And that's the problem people run into. And then Ian did the second class, and he talked about how you can't, people say, well, we want to talk about love, grace, and mercy. You cannot separate love from the idea of studying sin. And all the scriptures that he presented was, specifically when I remember in Ephesians chapter 4, you stop doing certain things so that you, in a loving manner or loving concern for your fellow man, start doing good things. They're all attached. So what I'm saying all that to say is, we will still come in here on different Sundays, and we may not talk about a specific sin. We may have like a discussion like Ian presented last time, or my first class. And 2, this morning we're talking about to covet or covetousness. We will have a part 2 on this, that we're not going to do everything just in this class today. And so it'll be just like any of the other classes Ian and I have done, where just because I'm doing covetousness today, Ian might come along later and say, I have more information on covetousness that I'd like to go over. So before we look at our information this morning, I have a question to get us going. Okay, now I'll ask it 2 ways. Where does faith come from? Okay, that's Romans 10:17. Faith comes by hearing the Word of God. What is the New Testament definition? I mean, it says faith is. What is a working definition of faith according to the New Testament? Okay. Hebrews 11:6. It says, let's see, not 11:6. 11:1. Faith, now Mark said evidence. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So, how does the world usually portray the idea of faith? Okay, leap in the dark, you're feeling it out, and somehow you get the confidence based on nothing at all to make this huge jump. That is not the biblical idea of faith. So here's another thing. When we were in school, somebody asked me, they said, if you could get rid of any one sin in the world, what would it be? And I know that back then somebody said homosexuality, somebody said abortion. And I'm telling you right now, sin, misconceptions, what have you, if I could fix the one thing, is I would wish that the world could see the difference between the Church of Christ and the sectarian world. Now, they're all out there, I'm saying religious folk are out there saying, well, you can't know the truth, and there's all these other things, better felt than told. I wish that we could at least get people the information, right? If they had the information, they could start making better choices, and those other sinful activities might be worked out by them getting information. I wish that they could have a split line of this is what the Bible says, and this is just what religious folk do. And I wish that we didn't have to combat those misconceptions, but we do. And so this is how I want to start this morning. Faith is not a leap in the dark. Faith is a substance, and it says it's the evidence of things that you haven't seen. So no man has seen God, but we do have evidence for His existence. Now, With that thought in mind, breaking the common idea of what faith is, a leap in the dark, what would you say about covetousness? You can say, this is my idea of covetousness. You can use a Bible passage and say, this is what the Bible says about covetousness. Or we were taking answers right now as someone to say, this is what the world says about covetousness. Mark. Okay, and that's Colossians 3, right? Mark said Colossians 3 says covetousness is idolatry. So what that ends up shaking out to be is we have to recognize, let's go back to 3:5. This is Colossians 3:5. Covetousness, which is idolatry. You may not carve out a wooden or a metal image and say, well, this represents the God I believe in. But whatever your full devotion starts leaning towards, then you have to say, that's my idol. Like, people, I'm saying they just work so hard to fulfill their car payment. They spend all their time working on their car. They spend all their time maintaining their car. You might as well say that's your idol. Now, okay, Mark gave us a scripture, Colossians 3:5. Anything else?
Could it be that you're envious of what your neighbor has and you want it?
Okay, so those are two different things. Now, you seeing what your neighbor has and wanting what your neighbor has, and so we have to, that's okay, because we're going to have another class on it in the future. Covetous does not necessitate envy, but it will lead there. So envy is something is actually going to be a separate thing, but would you say dissatisfaction? Okay, so Betsy would say it's seeing what other people have, which then creates an unnecessary dissatisfaction in yourself. Because what you have is fine, it's doing the job, right? A lot of times when we see other people, they have things, what they have is usually not anything more special than what we have. It just has a different label on it, maybe they paid more for it. Okay, anything else? Betsy says something that creates dissatisfaction in yourself. Desire that creates dissatisfaction in what you have. Mark said it's idolatry. Okay. Okay, that's going to be another thing it leads to. Coveting your neighbor's wife could lead to adultery. Okay, let's get into this. Now, I'll tell you, I would like to dispel with I think it's a shallow idea. How does like the sectarian community or even the non-believing, they have the idea of covetousness. What do they usually say is coveting? When you're talking to them about portions of truth and they're trying to show that you're not a perfect person, they say, well, you covet. What do? What's the illustration? Okay, they say, this is how people usually say it, and it's always towards men. You're driving down the road and you see a good-looking woman, and they say, you look too long. I'm saying that's not covetousness. Now, someone would say, you still shouldn't be looking too long. I recognize that I shouldn't be looking that long, possibly, but that's not the idea that's actually presented in the book. And we've talked about that before, too. I cannot help that I'm driving down the road and some women are going to wear next to nothing as they go outside. I can't do anything about that. And I also cannot help that I have a natural appreciation for the opposite sex. I couldn't do anything about that, and I can't help how they choose. And someone says, well, you have a choice as to where your eyes go. That's true. But just because I see that and then have natural appreciation for it does not actually give the constitution of what the Bible calls covetousness. Now let's look at this. Conversation. Is all covetousness bad? Oh. Okay, so it sounded like I heard 2 no's and 1 yes, and then I started hearing like definite ideas. Okay, this is just in the slides, because this is what happens. You start talking with somebody, and you might really have the true position. And this is just the way that it goes. It shouldn't be this way, but it is the way that things are. You have the truth, they don't. But they do happen to catch you on something that you didn't know. And now how do you look in the conversation? If you didn't know that, then maybe you don't actually know what you're trying to really talk about. Let's look at this. In 1 Corinthians 12:31, I don't know if somebody said this, covet earnestly the best gifts. Okay, Paul is talking to Christians and he tells them, y'all need to covet this. Now, we can look at this and someone would say, well, that doesn't apply to us because we don't have spiritual gifts anymore. I get that, but this is just for the argument's case. Not all covetousness is going to be bad. He says, covet earnestly the best gifts, and yet I shown you a more excellent way. I think if we would say it this way, if they were coveting the best gifts and he says there's a more excellent way, should we covet the more excellent way? I would say yes. Luke 22:15, look at what Jesus said. Now, here's a point to be made. Just so you know for your notes. In 1 Corinthians 12:31, that is not necessarily when he says covet. Zelo, however you want to pronounce that Greek word, zelu, is not the same word that you're going to find down here in Romans 7. Paul says, I had not known covetousness, or I had not known lust, except the law said, thou shalt not covet. Someone would say, well, that's a different word. That's fine. I'll give it to you. That's a different word. But when you come to Luke 22:15, Jesus said, with desire, I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. And that is the exact same word as Romans 7, where Paul says, I would not have known lust, except the law had said, thou shalt not covet. But Jesus just said, I have been coveting this time together. So when we look at it this way, what is covetousness in this context? Okay, it is a very strong desire. It does not have to mean that it's bad. Context is going to determine whether it's good or bad. Ian?
Can we say, like, with the implication that you're actually feeding it?
Okay, that's going to be another thing. We're going to get there. Ian says, now, you're saying about the bad way, right?
Yeah, like I'm saying, I can have in short order a strong passion towards something, but then I'm not going to spend my days feeding that, orienting myself.
Okay, so Ian says there are going to be things that I desire, but he says the distinguishing factor is going to be, do I feed the desire? Mark?
You have a strong desire to do good to your neighbor. Do you have a strong desire not to do good? So which one's best?
And the same thing that he just said then about, I can say, well, I'd like to do good to my neighbor, but then I actually never end up doing anything good. That's the same thing. It's like I had a desire for a bad thing, but I didn't feed it. We can also not feed our good intentions also. So, here we are. This would be something worthy of taking note over. Is all covetousness bad? No. And these are our examples. And it does, like someone says that's a different word, it'd be worthy of taking a note on that. Okay. And the end goal, too, I will say this. Y'all, we should be getting used to writing in our Bibles, because this is the type of stuff that comes up in the conversations. You go to 1 Corinthians 12:31, you don't remember the word. I'm not going to remember the word. And then you go to Luke 22:15, you're not going to remember the word, but you're going to have to bring it up at some point with somebody who maybe knows a little bit of other stuff. Now let's move on to this. This is a very good section if you want to talk to somebody about covetousness. In Romans 7:7-9, he says, what shall we say then? Is the law sin? God forbid. Nay, I had not known sin, but by the law. For I had not known lust, except the law had said, thou shalt not covet. But sin, taking occasion by the commandment, wrought in me all manner of concupiscence, for without the law sin was dead. For I was alive without the law once, but when the commandment came, sin revived, and I died. Now, why this is good is we actually start getting an understanding that these terms are all the same. Lust, covet, and down here where it says concupiscence, and really the idea of concupiscence is it would say inordinate affection for forbidden things. And I would then bring that in the idea of what Ian said about, am I feeding the desire? I'm going to have desires all over the place. It then turns into, what am I doing about it? Am I feeding it, or am I trying to fight against it? And then also, as you look at this conversation, he says, I had not known lust, except the law had said, thou shalt not covet. But sin, taking occasion by the commandment, wrought in me all manner of concupiscence. And this is what I think that we should also be talking about in our conversations about covetousness. And the idea of Romans 7. A lot of times, well, this is the thing. Who in here agrees it's good not to covet? Nobody's going to disagree with that. Now, do you covet? Okay. And this is what he's saying. The problem with sin, and I'm saying the law and our ability to keep law, is occasions. And this is what I mean by that. We look at certain situations, and that's what Paul's going to say when he gets into Romans about 7, verse number 16. He says, the things that I'd like to do, I don't do them. The things that I hate, I end up doing them. And then in verse 16, he says, but I consent that the law is good. And so an illustration that Dad uses about taking occasion, he says, I would not know lust except the law. It says, thou shalt not covet. And the illustration that Dad used was a mother talks to her very young daughter about boys. I don't know if like they're having the full-blown talk or they're talking about things to be watchful for when you start dating. And the little girl says, like the little girl hears it and she takes knowledge of it, but she says, I don't even like boys. And so what's she thinking? Maybe this is useless knowledge. I don't even like them. But when the occasion starts to arise, we need to be informed. And even then someone says, well, the occasion has arisen, we were informed, and we still fell prey to it. We're not saying that's a good thing, but we are saying that that is bound to happen. Now, before we really dive in, these are some good quotes. This is out of a book called, it's a set of books, it's a set of dictionaries. Kittle's Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. And this is why I started with Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the evidence of things not seen. Faith, the Christian lifestyle, is a reasoned out lifestyle. You have to be thinking, and this is what we say about playing chess. When you make a move in chess, what are you really supposed to be thinking about? You should be thinking about at least the next 2 or 3 moves when you're playing chess, and that's what people ought to be doing. Like Christians, and someone says, well, that sounds like it's taxing. It's protective. So this is what we're saying. Individuals take a job, they should be looking beyond saying, well, I will be making a lot of money if I take this particular job, okay? 2, 3 moves ahead. How many Sundays are you going to have to work? Are they going to be messing with you about that? You might possibly be making a lot of money. Is it a good work environment? I mean, let's really talk about these things 2, 3 steps ahead, and that's going to be a form of covetousness. So here's how non-biblical people thought about this word. It's a Greek word, right? Non-Christians are using this word, and this is how they thought about it. Non-Christians, non-believing Greeks in the first century, when they said the Greek word for covetousness, they thought of it as the waywardness of a man in conflict with his own rationality. So, what does that mean? Waywardness of a man in conflict with his rationality.
Illogical behavior.
Okay. We start making choices based on what we want when people that are standing by can say, look at us and say, you know that doesn't make sense. But the person says, I know it, but I want it. Waywardness of man in conflict with his rationality. Second quote, covetousness is evil. This was the idea of people in the first century in a religious connotation. Covetousness is evil not because it is irrational, but because it is disobedience to the command of God. But does this quote not actually still say it is in fact irrational?
Yeah, the only thing that's different is who's setting the goal.
Okay. But I will say this. Ian says the only difference between this quote and this quote is who determined that the end was bad. I'm going to be honest with you. I would like for us to get away from that idea. When somebody said, this person said, it's evil not because it's irrational, but because it's the disobedience to the command of God. I'm trying to get people away from the idea that God arbitrarily makes law. Just random. God says, don't fornicate. Well, why? God said, don't do it, don't do it. That's bad thinking. There's a lot of reasons as to why God said don't fornicate. I would rather that we just stick with this idea. It causes the waywardness of a man in conflict with his rationality. Quote number 3. The view is reached that desire is the chief of all sins, The will of God can be expressed in a single formula, not to desire. Now, there's a lot to be said about this, and that's why I said we're going to have a part 2. Don't desire. Okay, God says these certain things, don't desire them, but then what does He also say about our particular desires? Okay, He knows we would have them, and so some of them, He says, put them in a specific realm. Everybody has sexual desire. So what did God say? He says, get married, 1 Corinthians chapter 7. So, someone says, well, is it wrong to desire all the time, anything? No. If it's in its proper realm, it's okay. We all got to eat. You don't have to be, what the Bible would say, a glutton, and we see a lot of that. So there's going to be discussions for this, but we are going to look at desire this morning, and it's going to be on the basis of the waywardness of a man in conflict with his rationality. So let's get moving. And I do have this one more. Covetousness is desire as impulse, and this is my point too, though. That statement by itself is not good enough. We all have impulses. And what's the point of saying, I acted on an impulse? And maybe let's take away the word I acted on. Let's just say I had an impulse. Okay, he says covetousness is desire as an impulse. We're saying, why is that statement not enough?
Well, the idea is, so an impulse, if something's like really truly an impulse, the implication of something being an impulse is I don't really have 100% conscious control.
Okay, you can't start saying like I'm at fault for an impulse when the definition of impulse is you didn't have control over it to begin with. That's why I said take the word act out of it. I acted on an impulse. I could have had an impulse, gotten control of myself, and then said, we're not doing that. Okay. Covetousness is desire as impulse. Is anxious, self-seeking, bursts upon him with the force of immediacy. Now, let's talk about this. Is it, and I think what these quotes are saying, I think they're good information that give us time to talk. Is it a sin to be tempted? Okay, no. You can be tempted and then say no. If we're saying that covetousness is desire, and we saw it from Luke 22, it's a very, very strong desire. That's why I'm saying we need to get away from the idea of I saw a good-looking woman and I said, she's good-looking. And whatever these realms might be, you know, somebody walks by the liquor store that's always had a problem with drinking, and then they just say, I got that taste going. I got that feeling going, but I went home. That's not the same idea. So let's talk about that particular illustration. Ian said earlier, and we're going to look at it to the idea, Ian said it's the idea of feeding it. So if I had a problem with drinking, how would I possibly be feeding my covetousness for drinking before I've actually started drinking again? What would I be doing? That's it. If I'm going to continuously say, well, I got to get home, and I always have to drive by the liquor store, all I'm doing, like you said earlier, concupiscence, I'm creating a longing for what I've had in the past and just giving myself, and really, so are there things like that you can think of and you can taste it without actually having it? Okay, so if you go by and you just give yourself an imaginative moment of, boy, I remember that. That's feeding the covetousness. And how someone say, well, I don't know about that. How hard is it and how smart would it be to actually reroute yourself to not go down that way? And then you're saying, because then you know you don't want to go back down that road. So let's think about these things and let's start looking at some real examples. This is Joshua chapter 7. And this morning we're only using 2 illustrations from the Old Testament. And when I come back, we'll use more for covetousness because I want to really bring this in. So in Joshua 6, they have this command. They're going to take the city of Jericho. And they're going to have it done in a miraculous fashion, right? They walk around one time a day, James.
They're supposed to walk around for 7 days.
Once a day for 6 days. And then on the 7th day, they do it more than once. They blow the trumpets, they shout, and then the walls fall outward. So it's all a miraculous thing to basically show the God of Israel and not their particular power. And so this is a command that they had. When you destroy the city of Jericho, he says, the city shall be accursed, even it and all that are therein, to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, she and all that are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. And ye in any wise keep yourselves from the accursed thing, lest you make yourselves accursed when you take of the accursed thing, and make the camp of Israel accursed and trouble it. All the silver, gold, and vessels of brass and iron are consecrated unto the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord. So what's the command here? God tells Joshua and the people, when you take Jericho, what?
All the spoils going to the house of the Lord.
Okay. The only thing you can take are these particular metals. They go into the national treasury that takes care of everybody. So what he's really saying is individuals don't just get to start grabbing everything that you see. These particular things, they go to the treasury of the Lord. He says individuals don't get to go in and just start taking everything that they want. Here's Joshua 7:1. The children of Israel committed a trespass in the accursed thing, for Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the tribe of Judah, took the accursed thing, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against the children of Israel. So you've got the command, Joshua 6. Here's the breaking of the command, and here is the explanation of why he did it. And Achan answered Joshua and said, indeed, I have sinned against the Lord God of Israel, and thus have I done. When I saw among the spoils a goodly Babylonian garment, 200 shekels of silver, a wedge of gold of 50 shekels weight. Here's what we're saying. Here's our study. He says, I coveted them and took them, and behold, they are hid in the earth in the midst of my tent, and the silver underneath it. Now, let's start talking about our definition that we're using from, and when we say our definition, it's not like we came up with this out of thin air. We're saying covetousness is the waywardness of a man in conflict with his rationality. Now, based on this event, God says, don't take these things. Achan says, when I saw it, I coveted and I did it. If covetousness is the waywardness of a man that causes him to conflict with his own rationality, what would you say was irrational about this decision?
I'm going to somehow get away with this before the God that just brought down the walls of Jericho.
Okay. Now, Ian says, I'm somehow going to get away with this. He should have known he's not going to get away with it. Like, he basically is going to, he says it's hidden in my tent. So what has he had to do?
His family has to know something.
Okay, he enlisted people to basically keep my sin a secret. You're not secret. It's already been seen. Okay, what else is irrational?
He's not going to be able to spend it if people.
Okay, man. He says, I saw this good stuff and I said, I'd like to have that. What you going to do with it? Because you can't wear it and everybody's going to say, where'd you get that Babylonian garment? You can't spend all this money because people are going to say, man, where'd you get all this money? Now, let's look at these points. This picture, y'all, of James 1, or Joshua 7, is what James 1:13 talks about. Let no man say when he is tempted, I'm tempted of God, for God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man, but every man is tempted when he's drawn away of his own lust and enticed. Then, when lust has conceived, it brings forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. Now, here's our point that we made earlier. Look, he says you're already drawn away of your own lust. But still, you're at the point where actual sin has not taken place. Having desires is human, but you do not have to fulfill those desires all the time, and you also don't have to feed those desires. he says you're drawn away of your own lust and enticed. When lust has conceived, it brings forth sin. And then sin brings forth death. So we saw that with Achan. He says, I saw it, I coveted it, I took it. You see it, you want it, you do it. Those 3 points are in James 1:13 through 15, just like they're in Joshua 7. So now let's ask this way. Ian gave us a couple points as to how it was not rational for him to do this. It was not rational for him to disobey God, think it was going to be kept secret, and then also when you got all this stuff, you have no way of enjoying it because it's always kept a secret. Now, let's do it this way. Achan, in Joshua 6 and 7, how can you actually rationalize his behavior?
Simple.
What could he have been thinking when he did it?
Did you get away?
He might have been thinking, why did we get to do this when we left Egypt, but we don't get to do it now? 21 and 22. Give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and it shall come to pass that when you go, you shall not go out empty, but every woman shall borrow of her neighbor and of her that sojourneth in her house jewels of silver, jewels of gold, and raiment, and you shall put them upon your sons and upon your daughters, and you shall spoil the Egyptians. So, there's plenty of ways for an individual to start trying to rationalize it, but is there really any point in this when you find Joshua 6 says don't do it? He could have been saying in Joshua 7, let's ask this question. The gold and the silver and then the Babylonian garment, are those things inherently evil? He could have been saying that this is just material. It's not like these things hold any real value. What wrong am I doing? So there were ways for him to do this, but now let's do this, how he abandoned reason. I think I would lend this to what Ian said about you did just see God destroy miraculously an entire city and you think you're going to somehow escape it. Not only that one point, but Leviticus 10, I think he would have been alive. Whether he were alive or not, he surely would have known about Nadab and Abihu, struck dead in Leviticus chapter 10. Numbers 11:32, they all start complaining because they don't have meat. And then God sends a plague on all the people who are complaining. Numbers 12, Miriam starts having her feud with Moses. God turns her into a leper. Numbers 13, the people who said we can't take the promised land, the people are too big, they'll overpower us. That entire generation died in the wilderness. Number 16, Korah, Dathan, and Abiram swallowed up by the earth because they challenged Moses' authority that was given him by God. And then Numbers 20, verse number 12, Moses himself does not get to come into the promised land. And all we're saying about this is, this is the illustration I always use. Why did I not have to get spanked when I was a kid? I paid attention that Micah got in trouble for doing it, so I avoided it. That's the rational, that's in Proverbs. Why? Not like that's just a natural thing for me as like a 7-year-old. I don't want to get spanked. But wise people pay attention to the problems that other people are having, and if it's self-induced, they say, I'm not going to self-induce that on myself. He had the knowledge that these type of things are done by God, who had the ability to see everything they were doing. He abandoned the reason in that sense, but here's some more points. Someone then says, we ask the question, well, it sounds like God arbitrarily decided you're not going to take the gold this time, because they got to do it back in Exodus 3 and Exodus 14, but now you're not. So let's talk about this. Do you have any ideas as to why God might have said, don't do this? Now, let's look at this. It's not like he said, don't take anything. The spoils of the precious metals, they went to Israel. And so if the community is taken care of, is Achan taken care of? He's okay. It's not like God is, having... Let's make another point about what he had seen. where did these folk, they're wandering for 40 years, where did they get their shoes and their clothes?
God miraculously extended their lifespan.
Okay, God preserves their garments. It's not like God sends them out into the wilderness and says, okay, y'all be miserable for 40 years. So if the people are taken care of, Achan is taken care of, God's taking care of these people. It wasn't just a random statement of we don't get to spoil anything out of this. They were taking things that they had need of. Now, God says the individuals don't get to take these certain things. What type of message would you think could be sent to the Canaanites if the people of Israel are not plundering? Mark. Okay, that's it. Mark brings up Genesis 14, which is going to be a little further down, isn't it? Where Abraham makes that statement. Okay. 23? Okay. All right. Abraham goes out to the battle with all these individuals trying to get his nephew Lot back, and at the end of it, now does Abraham take some spoils? He takes enough to say our expenses and care for the people, but then after that he says, I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou should say, I have made Abraham rich. Now, how had the city just been destroyed? Every bit of it was miraculous, even to the fact that the walls fell outward. If a city is invading, the walls go inside. Now, if the Canaanites here, man, these people are taking cities and it's not about getting stuff, what does it then become? It's a righteous crusade, which is Deuteronomy 7. These are sinful people. And it's when we say sinful people, the 7 Canaanite nations, it's not like they were, we say sinful people. Everybody sins. These people were, Genesis 15:16 says they had reached just like total corruption. What's the actual word? Filled? Their iniquity is not filled. That's it. Let's have it on the screen just so we all know. Okay. For the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. If there was an evil way to do something, they were finding it. And that's why God says now they're not suitable neighbors for anybody and they need to be removed. Well, the fact that they're not plundering on an individual basis is showing the Canaanites these people are on a righteous crusade. It's not just about coming out and getting stuff. And then they also need to have this idea too. They're in the book of Joshua, they're in the conquest stage. They're not in the settling down stage. So how are your movements? You got 9 areas west side of the Jordan that you're fixing to have to take from the Canaanites. Now, if everybody's mass accumulating stuff, how effective are they going to be? They're not effective. We're in the conquest stage. This is not the time frame for all y'all to be looting everything that you see. We're in the conquest. We're not in the settling stage. Okay, now that's Joshua 7. One more before we close. Numbers, this is different. Now, the way that he left his reason, we said, was he had all this evidence to know he wasn't going to get away with it. He should have reasoned, I'm not going to get to enjoy it, but now let's look at these people. Numbers 11. Now Achan admitted in Joshua 7, he said, I saw it and I coveted it. Look at how this text says it. The mixed multitude that was among them fell a lusting. That's coveting. The children of Israel also wept again and said, who shall give us flesh to eat? We remember the fish which we did eat in Egypt freely, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our soul is dried away. There is nothing at all beside this manna before our eyes. Now, Numbers 11, here's their lust. Numbers 11:31-34, here's the response. God gives them the meat that they want, and then in verse 33, he smites them with a plague. And then it says, because there was buried the people that lusted. Okay, the lust, the fulfilling of the lust, and now let's ask this. Can you rationalize this? In their mind, they say, we want meat. We're out here with no meat. What's wrong with that?
I think it was said that why did God call us out here to kill us?
Okay. And
That the solution is worse than the original deal.
okay, there's nothing wrong with them saying, we wish we had meat, and this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the idea of you're losing your reasoning. There's nothing wrong with wanting meat. The problem, and you see that in Acts 10, rise, kill, and eat. Don't call what I have cleansed uncommon. What is it? God hath cleansed, call that not common. It's not the problem of wanting meat. It's how they actually abandoned their reason and they started desiring Egypt. You claim that you want meat so badly that you would actually go back to a place that not only had enslaved you, but they murdered your babies. Every baby child under 2 years old was killed by the Egyptians. And you say, boy, we had the meat back then. And then you had everything else attached to it. Now let's look at this. So does anybody, we were talking about this the other day, if you listen to Dave Ramsey, the financial advisor, when you're trying to come out of debt, do you know what Dave Ramsey tells you to eat? That's it. Rice and beans. No meat, Dave Ramsey? And he says, if you want to climb out of your hole, you're going to have to sacrifice. Now, these folk wanted to come out of bondage, and you know they wanted to, and they wanted to get away from an atmosphere where their babies are being killed, but then they turn all that upside down and say, we don't have any meat out here. That's life. It's filled with sacrifice. There are people who come to this country, and they recognize, they say, we can have a better run in America than where we are now. And they say, when we get to America, all we're going to do is eat rice and beans. What are you eating right now? If you're in the Marshall Islands, rice, no beans. So it's not that bad. They abandoned all their reason. Here's something else they did. And y'all, this is what we don't think about when we start our complaining. I doubt that they thought this was going to happen. Do you think those people, I think it would be hard not to. Do you think that they had built up appreciation for Moses yet? You don't think? I know that when he comes in, they basically look at him as an outsider because he was raised up in the house of Pharaoh. But he is the person who just brought y'all out. I mean, if you're not saying, God did it, but God did it through Moses. But they big time discouraged him because when you look at the text of Numbers 11, he actually has a conversation with God and he says to God, if these people are going to keep on this way, just kill me now. But this is what I'm saying. We all do this to each other the more and more that we complain. Look, if you don't like the circumstances, fix the circumstances. But if we're not taking any action, all we're doing is talking, and that stuff gets old real fast. Hebrews 12:12, he says to lift up the hands that are feeble and strengthen the knees of those who are feeble. And they greatly discourage this individual. And you notice at the end of Numbers 11, he says that all the people who lusted were killed. Not everybody in that time frame was lusting, right? There were some people who were full, they were satisfied. We're out here in the wilderness, but it beats Egypt. And then someone says, well, all we got out here is manna. And they say, it beats Egypt. What they did was they possibly could have created dissatisfaction in others and then led them to start having really the covetous ideas. And Matthew 18:7 says, woe to the person who brings about offense in somebody else. It's better for a millstone to be hanged about their neck. And here's the last point. Before they died, all their covetousness was doing was making themselves miserable. Well, at this point now, you couldn't go back to Egypt if you really wanted to. Like if they said, well, we're going to go back to Egypt. You're not going to get to go back there. You'd be executed if you went back there. So you have no choices. You're here, so you might as well make the best of it. And 1 Timothy 6:9-10, he says that contentment with godliness is great gain. And then he talks about feeding the desires, feeding the endless chase of desires, he says, brings about misery. Okay, this morning we'll stop here. I don't know what Ian has planned for next week, but I can say that we'll come back 2 weeks from now and have a discussion, part 2 of covetousness. And then we also have homework for individuals to take home today. Okay, questions, comments? Okay, nothing else. We'll take our break. We have the duty roster. Good morning. Good to see everybody here. I was told again that Jackie would not be with us. She's still getting medical attention. So this morning we're doing part 2 of covetousness. And does anybody remember, can you tell us what the idea of covetousness we were using 2 weeks ago and then in our homework and on our tests?
It's maybe a slight paraphrase, but strong desire causing an individual to leave right reason in pursuit of the object.
Ian says, strong desire to such degree that it actually causes man to abandon his reason. So that is correct. That's what we're working with. What is an idea that we're trying to get away from? Like someone says coveting is wrong. Why is it wrong? What's something we're trying to get away from?
Like flashes of temptation.
Okay.
We're now putting me in the covetous category.
Okay, that's not what I was looking for, but that is true. We're trying to get away from the idea of covetousness is not just desire by itself. It's not the idea, like Ian said, flashes of, quote, temptation. That's not covetousness. And so, like we use James chapter 1, being tempted and actually then fulfilling the temption are two whole separate things. I can be tempted and then walk away from it, and that doesn't then constitute that I actually coveted in that moment, okay? Another idea of when we say covetous is wrong, we're trying to get away from that too.
We're trying to get away from the idea that all covetousness across the board is bad.
Okay. Strong desire in and of itself is not always wrong, and that's out of Luke 22. Jesus said, with great desire, I have desired to take this Passover. Okay, there's one more that we're looking for. And Ian's getting, like class notes that we have talked about, the idea, if someone, say you get it.
Just the bare idea that it's bad because it's against God's commandment.
Okay. We're trying to move away from this idea that things are wrong simply on the basis that, well, God said so. God is not working with us and really, why do parents say that to kids? The kids ask why, and the parent says because I said so. Why does a parent do that? And I know there's going to be multiple reasons.
I would say because they either don't have the patience or they haven't thought through why they're issuing a particular order.
Okay. Either they don't have the patience or they actually have not thought through to communicate to a child why we don't do these things. That is, did you say discipline? Mm-hmm. Okay, and discipline is going to take explanation to the child about why we don't do these things, and when they do it, explain to them this is why we said we're not going to do these things. So God is, I think that that's pretty ridiculous that we would say Christians say that. Well, it's wrong because God said it's wrong. You're basically putting God at the level of either impatient or inexperienced parents. That's not going to work. There's very, very much reasoning behind why it is that He gives us these commands. So these are the quotes. We'll look at them just briefly again. And the top one is the one that we're primarily working off of. And it's just the original uses of the word, whether they were religious or not. That's how they use the word. Covetousness is the waywardness of man in conflict with his rationality. Then the second idea that we actually said, our first point is noted in it, covetous is evil, not because it's irrational, but because it's disobedience to the command of God. That's the idea that we're really trying to get away from. I believe that it's the command of God because He would be trying to protect us in a rational way. Someone would say covetousness is evil, not because it's rational, but because it's disobedience to the command of God. Well, we ask the question, why did God make it a command? The view has reached that desire is the chief of all sins. The will of God can be expressed in a single formula, not to desire. But then, like Ian said a moment ago, not every type of desire is wrong. We're going to have to cultivate, we have to have desire to grow as Christians. So I would say that this is going to be our best idea. Covetousness is the waywardness of man in conflict with his rationality. So let's look at this idea, and I'm asking you, going back to the idea, let's say parents sitting down with a teenager, like a teenager that's big enough to where we would say they can have some sense, a teenager that should have some sense, and they're also at the point where they can be getting themselves into trouble. It's not like, they need assistance, they can do it all on their own. What do parents say in those situations? They've already done something wrong, they did something they weren't supposed to, parents meet with them. What's one of the questions that parents ask teenagers in those type of situations?
What was your reason?
Okay. And what did you say in the back?
I was going to say, what were you thinking?
Okay, Betsy said, what's your reasoning? Mom said, what were you thinking? And that's exactly right. We ask people, what were you thinking? Now, what's a very common response when somebody does something that either they just full-on broke the rules, they did something that was not very smart, and they're asked, what were you thinking? What usually is the response? Okay, and then that's it. And then there's one more. Mark just said, I don't know. And then what's number 2?
Someone will say, well, my friend did it, so I thought I would do it.
Okay, so that's a sense of justification. Like Betsy said, well, I saw my friends were doing it, so I just thought I would do it. So they actually were admitting, they were giving some thought to it. I think a lot of times, we're going to go with Mark's answer and then we'll come back to Betsy's. A lot of times people do this thing where they say, I don't know what I was thinking. Or they say, I just wasn't thinking at all. Is that true? That's not true. And here's our next question. Are we ever without reason? No. Anything that we do is going to be calculated. So for people who would just say, well, I don't know what I was thinking, or they would say, I wasn't thinking at all, it really does nothing when we come into these type of settings where someone says, well, I don't know what I was thinking, and there not be some sense of a consequence, because they knew exactly what they were doing. So look at Matthew 26:15. Now, you would look at this, and I don't know what people would think, and you would ask the question, what was he thinking? This is Judas, and they said unto them, what will you give me, and I will deliver him unto you?
30 shekels of silver.
Okay, 30 pieces of silver, that's it. And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. Now, all this happens, Judas gets the money, he takes these high-ranking Jews to Jesus in the garden, they arrest him, and then Judas goes out and he hangs himself. So, what would you say was going on in his head? What was he thinking? You just went 3 years saying miracles. It's not like he can say, this person's not of God. And you can't say that he hasn't been good to Judas. Jesus it says in the book of Acts, he went about doing good just to men. I think that Judas would be able to say, like if someone asked him and he honestly say, is this, a friend of yours? Yeah, I said we're friends. And if not, if he's friends with any of the other apostles, he's a mutual friend. But what it is going to come down to is, this is it. It was calculated. So when you ask him, what were you thinking? He's not going to be able to say, well, I don't know what I was thinking. We know exactly what you were thinking. I want to make easy money, even at the expense of my innocent friend, innocent man who is my friend and then my friend's friend. There's nothing else, right? There's nothing else that would compel him to give up, turn in an innocent man and then say, I'll take 30 pieces of silver on top of that too. It's not like he thought that he was guilty of something. So at the end of the day, when he's upset, what type of things would we be saying to Judas when you get to have a conversation with Judas after he sells Jesus for 30 pieces of silver? Okay, I say, what type of conversation would you be having with Judas after he sells Jesus for 30 pieces of silver?
I would ask him, was the money worth it?
Okay. Was it worth it?
Yeah.
I mean, these would be the type of things that you would be saying to somebody who did this type of thing, rather than it really it's one thing if we ask the question and it's a leading question. What were you thinking? because in a situation like that, we don't know exactly what he's thinking. It's easy money, and I said in the class that we had a couple weeks ago, on Judas's part, I said, for Jesus to die, that he could take away our sins, we said somebody was going to have to play the part of Judas, whether it was him or not. Somebody was going to have to get into the authorities so that they would kill him. I would say that we are never without reason. And what I mean by that is, anybody, and I'm saying in the real sense, someone says, I was not thinking. That is never an honest statement. That's not reality. You're always thinking. What happened was, we allowed our desire, just like we've been saying from the get-go, it is such strong desire that we become wayward against our own reason. You always have reason, but at times we just give in to our desire. Now, we're going to make some points too. And I don't know, well, he wouldn't have had this point about what I was fixing to say. So, we'll come back to Judas, but let's read Genesis chapter 3 first. So, last week, and this is what I would say would be good for us to do as a point of Bible study, what were our examples of covetousness last week?
It was the Israelites turning back toward Egypt in their hearts because they didn't have meat and not variety.
Okay, Numbers 11 says that the people fell a-lusting. They were tired of having just manna, and they said, we want meat, to the extent that they said, man, we had it good back in Egypt because we had meat and we had all these other things to eat. Okay, what was the next one? Do you remember, James?
Adam and Eve.
Okay, we're going to use Adam and Eve today. That is a point of covetousness. The other one was Joshua 7, Achan. They took Jericho, and it says Achan saw the Babylonian garment, the gold and the silver, and in Joshua 7 he said, I saw it, I coveted it, and then I took it. So this morning, and this is what I was going to say, you could go through all kinds of scriptural accounts and basically start taking note of all the ways that they broke reason. And just document that because it's always going to be there. And it's going to be that way for ourselves too. When we do certain things, when we give in to covetousness, it will never make sense, James.
And then Cain slew Abel.
Okay? And I think we're going to use that one possibly when we get to envy. We'll probably bring Cain and Abel into the study on envy. So let's all read Genesis 3, 1 through 6 together, and this will be our today's example for covetousness. It says, now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field, which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, yea, God hath God said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden. And the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the woman, you shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took the fruit thereof, did eat, and gave also unto her husband, and he did eat. So, James.
She lusted after.
Okay. She started having such strong desire that it actually altered her reason. So what we want to do now is, does anybody remember we had, I can't remember if we used it in a sermon or just in a Bible class. So does anybody remember we had the discussion on there are laws and then there are fences? Fences. Yeah, like fence around your house, fence around your property line. There's a law and then there's a fence. Okay.
There's the breaking of the law, but then there's the practice that's put in place to prevent you from breaking the law, from getting to the point where we actually cross the line.
Okay, so the idea is, Ian said, number one, there's the action that is to break God's law. But then there are other actions that we would say ultimately are going to possibly lead you to the breaking of God's law. So we said there's laws and there's fences. So in the idea of covetousness, do you see a fence in here?
The first verse.
Okay, which part?
I mean, God said they would eat of every tree of the garden,
Okay.
except for that one.
Okay, but that's the actual breaking. Okay. So God said don't eat it. And that's all that you and I have knowledge of God saying. But when you get to verse number 3, when she's entering into conversation, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. So, I don't have any evidence that God said that. I only have evidence of Eve saying, we shouldn't even touch it. We know you shouldn't eat it, but she says you shouldn't even touch it. Now, why, and I'm saying, I know that we get it, but there's something we have to say about it. Why did she do that? Why did she come up with the idea that we shouldn't touch it?
Why did she come up with the idea that we shouldn't touch it?
Yeah, why would she create the fence?
Maybe because she had this desire, she was possibly being tempted.
Okay.
So she put that for herself.
Am I not going to then basically put myself in this arena if I just say, well, I'm going to handle it a little bit, but I'm not going to eat it. Because this is all it took. She starts looking at it and says, well, it does look good to eat, and it's desired to make one wise, so she starts reasoning through it. So, the idea, let's do it this way, is the idea of a fence. Okay, Mark.
So are you saying that she came up with the idea that they weren't supposed to eat of it?
No. I'm saying we know God said don't eat it.
Right.
I don't have a verse where God says don't touch it.
Oh, okay.
So in that sense, I'm saying she came up with the idea of saying, well, if we can't eat it, we shouldn't be touching it either. And I'm saying if you just go around handling it and say, well, I'm not going to eat it, but I'm going to keep it with me. Why even be close to it? So let's look at some ideas about this. Is it wrong? Is it a bad idea to have fences?
No.
I don't think it's a bad idea. What is it?
You might go outside of the mountain if you didn't.
Okay. Now, here's an idea, just to think about this. You have options in town. I don't know if this place, this one's definitely not. So in Martinsville, they used to have a video store where you go rent videos, and it was called Brewers. So in Brewers, you would go behind a curtain, and then they would let you rent X-rated movies. Blockbusters never did that. You could not get those type of movies at Blockbuster. So, what would be the best idea? And we're talking about fences.
That's the idea of not having that.
Okay, the idea is, like you said, we like Blockbuster don't even offer it. If we're saying in order to prevent yourself from doing that, I wouldn't want to give them my business on the basis of supporting individuals who rent these type of things out. But I'm saying for personal accountability, I would just choose to go to the store that doesn't offer it at all. And I would say that would be good advice to everybody. Like someone would say, well, I could go there, we're saying the fences. I could go there and not rent them. You could go somewhere else where you don't have the opportunity to do it. And I think that would be the better of the options. Now let's look at one more. This is actually the one that we used. It was out of the book that I had mentioned in the summertime. And the way that the guy made in the book is a bit invalid. We tell kids, don't have premarital sex. But then the same parents who tell that to their kids allow their kids to go to prom, which has been statistically shown to be one of the time frames that teenagers, consent to losing their virginity. We're already making a big evening of it, and we would say this is what the man in the book says. This is the command, don't fornicate. This is the fence. Now, if we know that we're going to put our young people into an atmosphere where the chances are higher, the temptation is greater, then he would say, build the fence and don't send them to the prom. The reason I say that is not necessarily valid is, this is a command by itself anyways. Lasciviousness in Galatians 5:19 would constitute dancing like having at the prom, unchaste animals in the body. So when we look at, this is something that we can start seeing as we study covetousness and different accounts of it, is what could have been done to prevent some of these things. Eve came, now what could someone say back to it though? As we talk about studying the accounts and saying what could have been done to prevent these type of things. What could someone say about fences as they read Genesis 3? They could look at Genesis 3 and we make a point about fences and someone could say it doesn't look like it worked. She came up with a fence and still did it anyway. Well, I get that, but that's like what we say about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We know the laws, we still break the laws. We make fences just to try to protect ourselves. Someone says, well, the fence didn't work. It is still a safety measure. So, like Mark said, fences help you not go off the side of the cliff. Okay, look at Eve's reasoning. Like we said, are you ever without reason? I don't think that you're ever without reason. And I don't think that in this moment Eve was without reason. She knew the command, don't eat. I would say she enhanced the command to say, don't touch. And then spent some time keeping the command. We don't know how long they had been around. So I'm getting a phone call. You guys mind if I take this from a 424 to see what if they try to come and worship? Hello. Hello. Hello, this is... Are you trying to talk to someone? No. Are you trying to talk to someone at the name of Church of Christ? No. Alright, thank you. Okay, that was not someone trying to get in touch with the name of Church of Christ. Okay. So we say she knew the command, she enhanced the command, and we do have to acknowledge that she spent some time keeping the command. So what would we say should build her reasoning on this? Like, we say don't do it. What should build a reasoning case for don't do it when we say they had spent some time keeping the command?
Haven't they been taken care of so far?
Okay, they should have said we've been all right without it. So it's not like we're actually noticing anything. And then, how would we say this? She already recognized it's not like they're limited. What did she say? They had all, go ahead.
They had all the trees in the garden or something.
Okay. If you're placed in the garden and you have a plurality of options, she said, we can eat of every tree in the garden. I don't think that someone could say, they say, well, variety is the spice of life. Well, you've got variety, but you just know you can't have this one.
Could, like another way of saying that be like the yoke wasn't grievous?
Yeah, it wasn't. Okay, I think that's 1 John 5. The commandments of the Lord are not grievous. This wasn't really that big a deal. He just says, I'm going to give you all these options. Genesis 2:15, y'all have to work to keep the garden, tilled and upkeep. You can eat all these things, you just can't eat this one. Now let's look at this though. Now, we just read Genesis 3:1-6, so we know how all of it went. What were some of the things that she could have said back to the serpent that she did not? That as you and I read this account, we would say, what were you thinking? Because there's plenty of things that could have been discussed. And I'm saying, we're going to have multiple on here, so y'all give me just something.
We have a track record. We've been living a happy life with God. Why is it we should now start trusting what you're saying?
Okay. They knew that, however long it had been, they knew they had, quote, good standing with God. God had not been bad to them. So why should we trust what the serpent is saying? Okay. Anything else?
Why should I take your word over God's word?
Okay. Now, I think that they, based on their reaction, they eat, their eyes are open, what's the next thing they do? They try to cover themselves, but after that, what do? Okay, they hide themselves. It's not like they don't know about God. So, they know they are a part of creation. I can't imagine that anybody in here, like I'm not trying to throw them under the bus. You know, you've heard people say on the TV program, if Adam and Eve hadn't sinned, I would have been the one to do it. I get that. But man, if you know you're a part of creation, why would you not ask, how did you get here? The serpent starts saying all this contrary information about God. If I'm a created being and you too are a created being, why should I listen to you over the being that created both of us?
This might be, did the guy visiting last week, did he question you about the serpent's part in?
No.
Last week, he was asking, which, I'll get into that later.
Okay. Alright, so that, anything else? The one that Ian said is going to come up a little bit later in the slides, or just on the bullet points. Anything else? Just on the simple basis of I'm a creation, you're a creation, it's not like she should have expected him to have just excess knowledge, above them. Her assumption, she could have assumed that he didn't have any more than her. Okay. Same point, different aspect. How did you get here? If I'm a creation and you're a creation, why would I think that you have more knowledge than the being that created both of us? Now, I think this was said already. Do you have a point, like she could have said this, do you have a point of reference as to why the Creator cannot and should not be trusted? At this point I'm saying, and we could take a note of this. This is basically how easy it could be to convince folk, if we might say it this way, and we can ask the question. As we look at it this way and say, there's a lot of things she could have said back. Is there an idea of why it was so easy for him to tempt her?
Oh, no.
Well, if you have something on here or what?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was just going to say, like, another option would have been like, why don't you and I, serpent, we're going to talk to God about this.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, they're sitting here having a conversation. I don't know how that would have worked. But ways to avoid it, because you certainly need a command. Now, here's one more. I mean, you and I are talking about how to talk to people. That's all this is. And people are going to talk to us about the Bible. He told them, God knows that you'll be as God. So she could say, my eyes will be open. Can you give me an example of something that I don't know already? So I don't think, and let's ask this question. Do you think that God made them just with no knowledge, or did they have knowledge? Okay, I'm only getting one answer so far. With or without knowledge?
They had knowledge.
Okay, they had knowledge. What'd you say? With. Okay, so we're all agreeing they had to have to know something. And number one, God had given them the command before they ate the fruit, be fruitful, multiply. So what are they going to do with the child if they don't have any reason? God created man in his own image. In the image of God created him, male and female. Created he them. God blessed them, and God said that they be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. So we ask the question, what would they do if they weren't mentally mature and they had a child? How are they going to deal with a child? And then number two, we have to ask the question, if someone were to say you are assuming that they have all these reasoning abilities, so if they're able to be fruitful and multiply, it implies that their bodies are in a mature state, right? So then the other option would be God gave them grown bodies with children's minds. Well, we know he's not going to do that. So it has to be assumed that they have these reasoning abilities. Now, let's look at this. It's not that she was without reason, and nobody ever is.
Right there, it says when the woman saw that the tree was good for food. When God had said, you're not to eat. So, I mean, this goes a little bit of an assumption, but could it be that the serpent was eating? of the tree, and she saw the serpent eating of the tree.
So-
because something in her mind made her think, okay, this tree is good for food. Well, no, it's not, because God said don't eat it. So,
Yeah, I don't know, like, if you're saying if it's implied that he was eating in front of her. I think that it could be just as simple as, like, I think that it could look like anything else to where she would recognize, this looks just like what we eat anyways. Do y'all think that an apple and a pear look similar? Okay, an apple and a pear look similar. I eat one, why can't I eat the other? I've heard one individual, he was dating a girl, and obviously he already wanted to go to bed with her because he made the statement of, he said, how can it be wrong on Tuesday, but we get married on Thursday, we put a ring on each other's fingers, we say I do, and then on Sunday it's acceptable. Nothing changed except for we know that God joined in the atmosphere. So I think that that's what was happening. It would be that type of question of, how can this look like anything else that we eat, and this one just not be okay? And we'll get into another point in just a moment. It was pleasant to the eyes, and it's called the knowledge of good and evil. It desires to be made one wise. The serpent saying, your eyes will be open. She took the fruit thereof and did eat. So, here's our point before we move on, and we're going to come back to a little bit more what you said. In that moment, she was not without reason. She was in a moment of very strong desire, and we say she made a calculated decision. Now let's look at this. Let's pull out of this and see what we can get. Then we'll come back to this. Is this not the reality of Genesis 3? That in her own mind, she had to say this to herself. There's a 50-50 chance that this serpent is telling me the truth, and what my imagination can conjure up is more enticing than my fear of what could go wrong. And there's nothing else to it. Like, you're not going to be able to say that she just wasn't thinking. She thought. And like Mark said about the temptation, she's now seeing it as good for food. What's different about this than anything else? Now, let's look at it this way. Let's go back. She had to have done this. Now, does it have to be phrased exactly like this? No. But the point stands. She decided, maybe he's right. Maybe I will take it and there won't be any consequences. Now, let's look at it this way. Here's something that people do. We have to give credence to it. Someone might bring it up. Is desire in and of itself independent from reason? Your desires don't have to make sense, do they? And this is what I mean. Here's number one. I don't know why people have preferences. Why do some people like blue Camaros over red Mustangs?
Red cars are usually caught speeding by police.
Yeah, I've heard that before, so you get a green one.
tradition.
Okay, you're being raised up, we're a Chevy family, and Ford's a piece of junk. So he's saying tradition. Well, some people, they don't care. So let's look at it this way. Since we're saying desire independent from reason, why do most people desire tastier foods over healthier foods?
Because it tastes good.
Okay, it tastes better. But then someone says, it's not good for you. And we say, it doesn't matter. Your desire is independent of the reasoning. Now let's look at this. Can two people, consensually now, can two people say they'd like to go to bed together, but they both recognize, I don't want to marry her. So what is it? Well, why would you not want to marry her? I don't think there'll be a good marriage partner. But we're just talking about one night. Desires are independent of reason. So one other point up here. Why is it that... Can I use your turn? Why would a young person want like a nice car? Reason, like you desire, so you want a nice car. But what's the reasoning behind it? Why would you tell a young person, maybe don't start out with such a nice car? What did I tell you? I told Tanner, you should sell the car you have now, try to make some money off of it, because you're probably going to wreck it. Mom made a face at that, but that's exactly what one of her kids did. Got him. What, the car that he exactly wanted? Boom, wrecked it. You can say that to young people, don't you? maybe not. Maybe don't get that car. Well, why not? You don't have any experience. And what would you do if you got this nice car and you wrecked it? You feel awful. So let's get you the theater. You won't feel so bad. But is a young person going to hear that? He's still driving, then so. No. Desires are independent of reason. You say, well, here's another point. Certain foods, you like them. There's no explaining it. And let's look at this now. Back to Mark's point about looking at it. So, Mark asked the question of, how did it then become the case? She's looking at it, now she desires it as food. So I was talking to Jack about this, and this is just like you were saying, all the different possibilities and what could be implied. So, if someone brings it home, and then they start opening it in the kitchen, can you smell bananas right away? I smell bananas right away. You're sitting in the car and someone starts peeling an orange. You smell it right away. So in the moment, your senses that are being enticed, like we look at Adam and Eve and say, why do it? Well, there are some things that we just say, you weren't going to get past it without experiencing it. I wish that it wasn't that case, but some people, we just can't talk to them and they do it anyway. But we're talking about she sees it, she thinks she's going to get some type of wisdom benefit out of it, and then you basically put the idea of, if it smells good too, there's all kinds of different things that could be at play here. So, as we talk about fences, we're almost done, but as we talk about fences, we're going to put up another idea here. When you start thinking of it this way, there's a 50-50 chance that what he's telling me is true. And what my imagination can conjure up is more enticing than what my fear tells me not to do. So, what do we talk about, and we'll just say it this way, what was something that she could have thought about, even if it did work, it may not be worth it. There's a phrase that we use. Okay, better be safe than sorry. That's basically it. But what do we say about the devil, you know? The devil that the devil I know is better than the one I don't. And this is what I'm saying. Even, let's say this, she's dissatisfied. She's grown dissatisfied about, well, we can have all these trees, but I can't eat that one. And because I can't have that one, I am dissatisfied. That dissatisfaction could possibly be better than the bad outcome of breaking of the law. And we can find that in a lot of places. So, that type of thing. Y'all remember the book of Esther? Haman? Why was Haman upset? Mordecai wouldn't bow to him. One person in all the kingdom wouldn't bow to him. That's dissatisfaction. So he starts chasing that dissatisfaction. What does it give? At the end of the book, he's hung. So you say, the devil I know is better than the one I don't. I can put up with this dissatisfaction because I have no clue what's going to be over here. Okay. What did she not factor in?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if they had, an idea of what that meant. Separation, I don't know. She took the fruit thereof, did eat, gave also to her husband with her, and he did it. Now, I don't know if she went in saying, I'm going to eat it and then I'm going to get Adam to do it. Or, another saying, why would she take it and then give it to him? Misery loves company. I don't know. I don't know if it was already in her head or if she got it and started feeling bad and then said, how about you do it too? But here's what we do need to think as we close about covetousness. Our covetousness touches everybody. So here's what I mean by this. Like, my dad's dad used to see someone driving a nice car, and this is what he would say. He would say, I wish I had their car, and they could get a better one. Well, that sounds nice, but you are still, in fact, saying, I want what they have. Godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out, and have food and raiment, and having food and raiment, let us be there with content. But they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts which drown men in destruction and perdition. So, she takes it, she gives it to somebody else. The form of making is it always touches somebody. So let's do it this way. This is a real example that's been given to me. People in a household together, they said, we're just losing money. Like this is a whole family that's living together, so we're just losing money and we don't know what's going on. One person, the father, is going into casino and gambling all the money away. So who does his covetousness touch? The whole family. Okay. So now let's give it another one. So have you ever heard Dad say why he doesn't go into Walmart? Okay, Dad says, I don't go into Walmart at all because I will end up spending money. So if Mom gets what they need at Walmart, Dad says, I don't go to a tool section, I don't go to the automotive section, I just don't go in them. So now let's ask this question. And I'm using women as an example. She would say I could be just as bad. If a wife racks up credit card debt on just shopping, who does it touch?
Everybody.
Okay, who's going to bail her out? Okay, man. I'm like, what that could do, strain and stress on a marriage to find out, you know, hey, I've got this huge bill that you never knew about. That's tough. So what we would say is, avoid it on the front end. And then if it's not, like you might be saying, well, immediate family members, they don't have immediate family members to bail you out, that's where I basically start having a conversation of that's why we have the government system that we do. I'm not saying that it's good. Your taxpayers are paying by and large for a lot of people who have been overly covetous, like right now. My age group, millennials are going to say, oh, we don't have any money, but they're fixing to buy a PlayStation 5 and a new iPhone. They got money. They're just not being smart with them. So if we look at all these points this morning, we should be saying there's always going to be a reasoning process behind it to save us from it. And while our desires may not make sense, our desires are always going to be having a battle with reason. Never without reason. And what we should be saying is the things that we need versus the things that we want, and basically the things that we want in the way that it will hurt other people, we're going to have to be cultivating these mental exercises. You know, and here's the thing too about, y'all know, like I know you know, buyer's remorse. So what do you do with yourself? Just continuously have buyer's remorse, or do we start making like an exercise of maybe saying like Johnny says, I'm not going to go in there. Why would you go in there if you just go out with buyer's remorse? And you then just say, well, you know, buyer's remorse is a pretty good thing. Making yourself tell buyer's remorse to be quiet is a bad thing. So all these different points in there, and these are what they do look like realistically. They're all over the place. They're packaged differently for different people, but everybody's going to be going through the mental exercises to avoid it. Okay, we'll stop here this morning. Ian will have next week, and he said he's coming back with witchcraft part number 2, and then after that, when he gets done with that, then we'll start moving into the sin of envy rather than covetousness. Any questions, comments? And then also, we don't have a homework sheet today, and we didn't have a test today, but you should be getting new take-homes next week. Okay. We'll stop and take our 10-minute break.